Well, as we come to the end of Paul's conversation about slaves and how they should behave in this present world, he goes on. Its first concerns we talked about yesterday was that we should show those people who are in positions of authority over us, we should show them respect so that they won't go around slandering the gospel. Basically saying, the Christians are a bunch of rebellious, disobedient, hard to control people. I'm afraid sometimes that's really true. We can be that way. But nonetheless, Paul goes on in verse 2 by saying, those, that is slaves who have believing masters, are not to show less respect for them because they are brothers. In other words, we look at them and say, you should know better than to keep me in this bondage or to have this power over me. Instead, he goes on to say, they are to serve them even better because those who benefit from their service are believers and dear to them. And these are the things you are to teach and to urge on them. I don't think that this was any easier for the people in Paul's day to hear than it is in our day to hear these things. I mean, even though you may not be in a situation of enslavement, you may feel like that you're being lorded over by somebody who's in a position of authority that's greater than yours, that they're basically domineering you and controlling your life. And sadly, sometimes that happens even within the church. I've known of churches who actually had a theology, we used to call it the shepherding doctrine, where basically people had to ask their pastor for permission to go to school, to get married, who to marry, whether they could take a vacation, where they could live. Everything in their life, they had to go to the pastor and ask him to give him their wisdom. I remember when I first started pastoring our church here in Spokane, so many, many years ago, I had a young man come to me and wanting to know whether he should move his business into a different building within the city. And I said, well, first of all, I'm not a businessman. Secondly, I don't really know the dynamics of the economic system here in this community and whether that's a good idea or not. And thirdly, I don't even understand your industry. I don't know why you're asking me this. And he said, well, my previous pastor, I'd ask him any question, he'd tell me exactly what to do. And I said, well, I think he was wrong. He shouldn't have been doing that. Well, apparently he didn't agree because I never saw that guy again. Anyway, because he wanted me to be the master who was telling him what he should do. He didn't want to take the responsibility. I tell people all the time, you serve God. He hears your prayers as fast as he hears mine, and as completely or incompletely as he hears yours and mine. You need to talk to him. Now, if you're going to ask me, what does the Bible say regarding X, Y, and Z? I'll tell you exactly. But it's kind of like people who will come to me and say, well, I'm thinking about getting a divorce. My spouse has done this. Even having people saying my husband or wife was unfaithful. They violated the vows of marriage. And my response is never saying you should divorce that person. I don't think I have any right to tell anybody at any time that they should get a divorce. I can tell somebody that if spouse is unfaithful, the moment they violated the bond, the covenant of marriage, that was the divorce. That unfaithfulness was a divorce. If you want to follow through with a legal divorce, that's really something that God says you can do, but he doesn't say you have to do it. But that's a decision that you have to work out. And I tell people, if that's something that is what you want to do, then no, I'm not going to judge you for it. You have all the biblical right to do it. And if you say, I'm going to continue to try to save my marriage, my only caution to them is don't then continue to hold this action over their head. If you decide to continue as a husband and wife together, then recognize that you're renewing the covenant and you're choosing to forget the past and build upon the future and the present and the future. Or I should say, build the present so that you can have a future. But those kind of decisions are really outside of my purview. I don't have any right to give people that counsel. The same way people ask me, should I go to college? Should I get a career? What school should I go to? I can give you my personal opinions about things that I might know something about. But ultimately, that decision is yours. We are supposed to be free moral agents who are making decisions based upon what God, we believe, has spoken to us using our own judgment. And the just shall live by faith. So if I make a decision honestly in faith before God, I know that he will lead and direct my paths. I believe that if I make the wrong decision, but I do it in faith, that God will turn it into a good decision or he'll redirect me so it turns out well. because it's impossible to know the answer to everything. But I do know that God wants me to live a life that's fully submitted to what he wants, so that even though I don't know the right answer, I'm always having an attitude in my mind, Lord, your will be done, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Let your kingship be manifest in my life by my submission to you in whatever that is. So that if I don't know what's the right choice, the right decision, God, I'm asking you to give me the wisdom to make the right decision. And if I make the wrong one, then correct me. Readjust my paths. I mean, I don't mean to make this all complicated, but I think it's really important for us to realize, as Paul would say to the Corinthians, if you found yourself in a form of bondage, don't necessarily try to get yourself or extricate yourself from it, because God may in fact have created the dynamics which you're in. Now, Paul goes on when he says, if the person who is over you and maybe is exercising authority in excess, what you need to do is not lose your respect for their position. As my dad used to always say, you salute the uniform, not the man inside of it. I was a military brat, so that made a lot of sense in my life. But the bottom line is, he said, you don't let their personality or lack of a good one get in the way and keep you from being effective in your ministry. He says, you continue to behave and follow orders unless they ask you to do something that is illegal. And that's always the caveat. We ought to obey God rather than man. So if people in authority are asking you to do something that's dishonest, illegal, and in violation of your conscience, then you need to really say, out of all respect, due respect, I cannot do that because I have to obey God. I have to submit to his authority. And that's why he said what you should strive to be is to be the best employee that you can be, to work the hardest, to really display true character. When I was first in the ministry, I had to pick up a lot of jobs. I worked in all sorts of factories in Southern California because I didn't know enough for anybody to pay me to actually pastor. And so, I mean, I did a lot of jobs, and these companies were always trying to hire me because I was the hardest, fastest worker they had. And I was doing that because I had one concept in my mind. I need to do everything I do heartily as unto the Lord. And I remember one time I was putting offloading lids for 50-gallon drums off of a railroad car, a box car, and I'm running back and forth. Of course, I was younger and in better shape, and I'm just really moving as fast as I try. I'm trying to get this car unloaded as fast as I could. And one of the regular employees came up to me, a union employee, said to me, "Slow down, you're making us all look bad." And I thought, okay, here's a dilemma. Well, I tell you the truth, what I did. I kept on working hard and diligently, but I did slow down because suddenly I became conscious of something, that I'm really putting these other employees who will be here long after I'm gone in a bad light. Well, it wasn't surprising that the foreman came up to me and said, "Would you be interested in a full-time job?" And I had to say, thank you, but no, I can't do that because it's only a part-time thing for me right now, hoping to go into ministry. But saying all of that, we find ourselves in all kinds of these situations. And I think the key to knowing how to navigate them is to always keep in mind that I need to do what I do in a way that shows respect for the person for whom I'm doing it. That whether I am selling something to somebody or I am buying something from somebody who's selling to me, I need to be respectful of what they're trying to do. I shouldn't be disrespectful. I should treat them with deference and kindness. Now, I get it. Sometimes I struggle because I've dealt with salespeople who are really not honest. I mean, quite honestly, they're trying to pressure me into buying something and doing something that I don't want. I'm not interested, and I don't believe that their product is really all that qualified. And it's really tempting for me to kind of say something to put them in their place. And if you know me, I have somewhat of an ability to do that. I'm ashamed to say, actually. And I've come into such conviction with the Lord many times, as saying, I appreciate it. I don't mean any disrespect. It's just not for me. And I'm sorry, but I apologize and try to excuse myself as easily as I can, because it's easy to, in this day and age, to think that being a jerk is some kind of a title that you want to wear. And, I don't have to have the title. I can do that without a great deal of effort on my part. it was the kind of home I grew up in. You should have seen my dad in action. That was something to behold. But the simple fact is, people should be respected not because they're good, not because they deserve it, but because they're made in the image of God and they have inherent value. And I found it was really interesting to me that when I remember one job I had working for the county irrigation district, it was a great job shoveling mud out of irrigation canals all day long in 110 heat. And the foreman was a guy who didn't say much. Every man on that team hated his guts, disliked him because he worked as hard. He used to say he works as like a rented mule. And but the thing is, I always treated him with a great deal of respect, and I wasn't even a Christian at that time. I did whatever he asked. I never talked back. I never criticized him. I never joined in the conversations, of belittling him. And that man actually became a good friend. I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing. He was much older than I was, but he treated me with such regard and respect that I never forgot that. And I think that we need to understand that there's more at stake than the moment that we're struggling with. There is a long-term consequence of our actions. And that's kind of been the theme all this week, hasn't it been? The fact that everything we do has a consequence, even the things that other people don't see. Because God always sees. And every time I do something, it's like I'm planting a seed in the ground, and it's going to produce a crop. And the question is, what is that crop going to be? Something that's going to be glorious and enjoyable, or is it going to be something that I'm going to go out with a weed eater or the spray and go out and kill and try to get rid of? I can't even think of the word right now. Sorry about that. Anyway, I better wrap this up. I've gone way over, but thank you for just giving me the opportunity to do this. Thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to put up with my meanderings. God's blessing upon you, and may you have a beautiful weekend worshiping together with God's people.